toy lovers, to another episode of ToyLines.com. I'm your host, Tom Romero. With me, as always, is Ian Westoff.
Hello, everybody.
And we have a special guest today with us, the author of Toys That Time Forgot, Mr. Blake Wright. How are you, sir?
Good, man.
Welcome.
So, gentlemen, what toys did you always want as a child? Or what do you think IP should have a reboot? There's been tons of reboots now. Masters of the Universe Classics, Thundercats Classics. I mean, what would you like to see? Or do you have a secret wish of, that one IP that never got a toy?
My toy line is a guilty pleasure movie from the early 80s that for some reason while it's not very good, well, a lot of people love it and I love it, but historically it hasn't gone over very well. And then when I found out when I was researching the first book that they actually were going to make toys for this, but then didn't, I was like, oh, what could have been, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's Crawl from 1983.
Oh, right. Yep.
When I saw that movie, I mean, obviously you saw they were pulling from Dungeons and Dragons and Dragon's Lair. They were pulling from Star Wars. But it was so, and to borrow a phrase from Barney Loomis, the old Kenner boss, toyetic. I mean, it had heroes, it had villains, it had Cyclops, it had horses with fire coming out of their hooves. It had, it was just, there were a lot of potential. There was a ton of potential with Crawl. Mm-hmm. Now, Knickerbocker probably wasn't going to go all out. Mm-hmm. They had, I believe, somewhere between 8 and 10 figures sculpted, and they had a Widow of the Web playset that was concepted, but never, I don't think it was ever sculpted, which is the part where Aenir goes to the big crystal spider that comes out, and they had that concepted, and they had what basically would have amounted to a Nerf glaive.
That's that star thing, right?
Yeah, the weapon,
right? Okay.
Boomerang type thing. So they made one of those with like Nerf tips on it, and that was probably going to be all we saw, if we even saw all of that.
You said Knickerbocker was the toy
company?
Yeah, they did Lord of the Rings, didn't they?
Right. Yeah. So they had 8 figures there and 2 horses.
What else did they do? Were they well known, or?
They did a lot of plush early on.
Oh, okay.
That was their big thing. They were kind of late to not totally late, but they weren't really into the boys' toys action figure game. They did Lord of the Rings, which was miserable for them. That was a bad experience. They did. I mean, I have documentation where they showed interest in doing Dune.
Oh, wow.
Which would have been another disaster because LJN ended up doing Dune and it didn't do anything for them.
And I think McFarlane now has the rights for the new Dune movie.
The new one, yeah, I think that's right. And so they also did the closest other action figure thing that they probably did was they did Annie.
Oh, wow.
Which was they were, I think, 5 or 6 inch figure / doll hybrids. They did like Daddy Warbucks' car, which was really cool, and it's pretty rare. Memory serves. I think it was Daddy Warbucks' car. Yeah. But they also, in the first book, if you read the thing about Mysterians, they, for all intents and purposes, they beat Hasbro to Transformers. Yeah, go back and read that chapter. It's the first four of the first 6 mini cars that Hasbro did for the G1 line came from Knickerbocker. They had them already. But when Hasbro bought Knickerbocker, they inherited them. And the M's that appear on the hoods of and I'm forgetting who, the Wind Charger and a couple of the other ones, they always thought it meant Microman because that's where they thought, they would trace it back. But it really possibly could have been for Mysterians, because that's what Knickerbocker was doing.
Now, are you working on your 3rd book now?
I am.
I know a lot of people are anticipating it.
Yeah,
will it be another Kickstarter?
Yeah, February of 2021 is the plan. But like we were saying before we started, with the virus hampering my travel plans, I'm just hoping at this point that I'm able to get the material, because I won't do it. I won't release it if it's not up to the standards of the first 2 books. I will wait it out. And with the first book, it was pretty much done when I went to Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. The second book wasn't. It was about 70% done. And I didn't want to do that again because it took me until almost July to finish and get everything proofed, all that, and then get it to the printers. And then I was struggling to actually get it out in the same calendar year, which was always my goal. And we ended up getting the books delivered to our doorstep on December 22nd. And most of the Christmas holiday shipping out books to Kickstarter backers.
Volume 2, you were able to get Super 7 involved with the Toxic Avenger figures. How did that come about?
Well, I've known Brian for a long time, and he helped, Brian Flynn, and he helped with the Alien chapter in the first book, because he had some of those pieces from 79, because they, that's how they got into all this reaction stuff, was to bring back the lost Alien figures from Kenner in the 70s. And it just so happens that I was going to do Toxic Crusaders for the book, because there was a second wave of those figures from Playmates that didn't make it out, and I had a pretty good bead on both art and prototypes for that wave. And then so I reached out to Brian and said, hey, what's the feasibility of doing something like this? And he said, we could probably do it. How many do you need? What are you looking at price wise? So we worked it all out on the business end. And the one thing I said, I really don't want them carded, because that's going to get damaged when I ship it, or at least it would be heightened possibility. But I don't want them just baggied. So what can we do? And so we came up with the mailer box concept. So I don't have one with me, or I would show you.
Oh, no, I've seen one.
Yeah, so they come in a white mailer box.
Okay.
That's actually addressed to Melvin Ferd, who is Toxie's character in the movie. Traumaville, New Jersey, or whatever. 1234 Newcomb Road, or whatever.
Here's a piece of trivia. I'm from Harrison, New Jersey.
Oh yeah.
There's a scene, I believe it's in the diner, where Toxie loses his anger and kills everybody. We actually used to go to that diner when we were younger. We would ride our bikes there. Yeah, it's in Harrison, New Jersey. It's right at the end of Harrison Avenue.
Right on. Yeah, so we were able to work it out, and we got them, and they're great. So it's my own colorway. It's a slime Toxie variant. So he has his clothes on, but the figure himself, any limbs or head, is translucent green. And it was a fairly limited exclusive, and so we were able to not only to give it to offer it as a reward level, but I knew I had extras, and so we would sell them as part of the post Kickstarter. Anybody who missed out can still buy a Toxie or a Volume 2.
Now, for Volume 3, will you have any extra figures like you did in Volume 2, or is that something you're working on, or it's just the book this year?
I'm still working on what the reward levels are going to be. If it makes sense for the figures, then yeah, I would try it again. Of course, 2 years removed, and with everything going on, the prices have probably gone up, so we probably have to make it, as long as we can make it economically viable, I would be willing to do it again. But again, I would want it to have some sort of link to some material that's in the book. So if there's if there's another line that pops up in the book that Brian has a license for, then I could say, hey, can we do this again? And we would try to work out the numbers. And Super 7 is of a size to where, they're flexible enough to where they can do stuff like that. I mean, it would be hard for me to go to Hasbro and say, hey, and they would go, who are you? So, but Super 7 is the right size to where we could get something like that going. I even think probably Funko is too big. They probably wouldn't even mess with me. If I wanted maybe if I bought enough of a pop from them, but I don't really like pops.
Blake, I apologize. I haven't read your books, but I wanted to ask, how do you go about this researching the figures that are going to go into it? Like, where do you start with that?
It usually the internet's a wonderful source for this kind of thing. You can go to Google, type in unproduced toys and click images, and here they come. You'll see a lot of, and that's a good place to start. So from there, you start trying to attach names to the projects. Sometimes LinkedIn actually was a really good source for former toy company employees. Now, LinkedIn is not a good source to reach out to talk to people, but they'll allow you to match up like who was there at what time. So maybe, and if you can find that person outside of LinkedIn, if you get an old phone number or an email address or whatever, and you reach out, probably, 50 to 60% of the time, you'll get an email back either saying, yeah, let's talk, or no, I don't want to mess with that. So
how was the interviewing experience? Did a lot of people, were they willing to come forward, or did a lot of people shy away from it?
Yeah. I've had some folks say, that's in the past. I'm not a part of that world anymore. And one of the motivations for me to start doing this when I did, because if you were 30 making toys in the 80s, you're 70 now. We're going to lose these guys. And we've already started losing these guys. So if you don't get a microphone in front of them, story's gone. So that really spurred me to do it when I did. among other things, because I would see stuff pop up on the news, and I would get, man, I hope somebody talked to that guy before he passed. When Keith Robinson, the father of Intellivision, passed away at 61 years old or whatever, I was just like, man, I hope someone got that guy's story. That would be a really cool book. And he's done enough interviews where I think that was preserved. But it's things like that where you realize, yeah, you better start talking to these guys because you're going to start losing them. I mean, there's some sculptor friends that I have that are, in their 70s, and at least one toy guy that I visited who's out in California who's 80. Well, he was 83 when I visited him. So he's probably 85. So yeah, a lot of it has to do with time.
Speaking of Intellivision, cover video games in your book, and like specifically, I'm thinking about the legend of like the Atari dump site. Have you ever covered that with all the ET games?
I went to Alamogordo a couple of years ago and went and found where the coordinates are for the dump. The dump's not there anymore. It's just a barren piece of land. But I did go to there's a museum in Alamogordo that has a display. And it's a funny story because we went to, there's like a space museum there, and then there's like a county museum. So we went to the space museum thinking that's where all this stuff would be, and it wasn't. Because they had like a Star Trek toy thing happening at the time. We're like, oh, well, maybe that's where it's at. So we went, and they're like, no, you want the county museum. And it was like 4:45, and the place closed at 5. And this was the only day we were going to be there.
Oh, man.
We jumped in our car and hauled ass down the street. Luckily, Alamogordo is not a big town, so it's just down the street. We got there, and we walked in, and the woman was like, my wife was with me. She goes, sir, we're closing. And I was like, I understand that. I told her my story. I said, I write these books. I really want to see this. And she goes, oh, come in. So
that was nice.
She actually walked us back to the display, and she sat there and explained it to us, how it all happened. And there's that documentary.
Yeah.
I forget who did it now.
I remember Ernest Cline did it.
Yeah, Ernie Klein's in it. Zach Penn did, and that's that got me interested in actually wanting to go to Alamogordo in the first place, because I'd forgotten all about that. And if you read all of the newspaper clippings that are in the cabinet where the artifacts are, the numbers actually don't add up. They Atari had, there's something about like 13 trucks full of stuff, but Alamogordo waved them off after like 7 or 8. So where'd the other trucks go? So we were thinking, like, I wonder if it was like a midnight run across the border to Mexico, and they just okay, that was actually got me curious. It's like, I wonder where that stuff went.
Yeah,
and it wasn't all just ET. It was
Superman and
it was cartoons. It was old systems. It was old controllers. It was everything. It was a warehouse in El Paso, and they just dumped it.
It was a cool documentary to see because, like you said, it wasn't just ET. It was all the stuff. And I always thought it was just ET. And then you watch it, you're like, oh, that's one of the joysticks. And this.
Yeah, that's a 5200 controller. What's it? Yeah, no, it was really interesting, really enlightening, and a very interesting story. And it's that kind of story that I'm attracted to for these type of books. I mean, I'm pursuing other pop culture type books beyond the Toys That Time Forgot. I mean, this third book is probably going to be the last in that series. It makes for a good trilogy. And there's other stuff that I want to do, and some of it I'm already working on. So, would you ever release the Toys That Time Forgot as like a 3-pack? That's been talked about, with a nice slipcover maybe. Yeah, that'd be cool. Countless. I get emails every day about reprinting Volume 1 because we sold out. It was 2017 when we put it out, and I sold through them probably halfway through 2018. We kept 50 books back so we could pair them with Volume 2 that's cool, as a reward level for the Volume 2 Kickstarter. We called it late to the show or whatever. So you could have both books, and those were the last ones we had. So you kept one for yourself, though. Oh yeah, no, okay, I have mine. Yeah, but funny story. I got contacted by a professor who works at Otis School of Design in California. They have a toy program there, and she wanted both books because she wanted to use them in her class. And I was like, I don't have a Volume 1 for you. I can send you Volume 2. And she was kind of distraught. And I was like, there's not a lot I could do. And then I actually ended up taking my mother-in-law's copy and sending it to, and which she wasn't happy about either. But yeah, I had to steal from my mother-in-law in order to give the professor at Otis a copy of Volume 1. So
now it is a beautiful book, but have you ever considered maybe like a PDF?
The problem with PDFs is once I do that, show's over. It'll be out there. So if I ever wanted to reprint them, if I ever want to keep monetizing Volume 1, I can't put out a PDF. It would kill it.
Like if you wanted to put out a reissue of one, but with more stuff in it.
We've talked about that too. I mean, I was approached by 2 publishers, one small, one actually 3, but one small and one very big, about putting the books out, beyond just the limited Kickstarter run that I've been doing. The problem is clearance. I asked a lot of people before I put out volume 1, should I go to these toy companies and ask permission to do this? Is it better to ask for forgiveness or permission? And everyone told me forgiveness. Every time. Because if you take it to a toy company and say, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to talk about this part of your past, it'll sit on a lawyer's desk for months. And when you press them on it, the easy answer is no. And then that kills it. So instead of that route, I took the route of, I think that most people understand what I'm doing and understand that, it's not a threat. A lot of this stuff I'm talking about is years and years old.
It's like history in a way.
Yeah, my philosophy has always been, and this gets people pissed off when I say it, but everyone that collects prototypes and old, unproduced stuff, and there's a ton of collectors out there that love this stuff. That's stolen material. It is. I mean, and people will argue with me about it till they're blue in the face, but that walked out of a toy company without the company's permission. Either the company was closing down and they, employees took it as part of their separation package or whatever, thinking that maybe they could sell it down the road. Or it gets thrown away and they guys go dumpster diving or whatever. But if companies were going to have problems with me posting or publishing photographs of old prototypes that never made it out, my theory was always they should have kept better track of it when it was in their possession. Because, I mean, there's a market for this stuff and it's a pretty big market. It's getting bigger every day. But when you strip all the secondary stuff away, that stuff was never supposed to leave.
Is it safe to say that most of your pictures came from collectors?
The first book came from, a lot of toy companies have actually participated in my book, in the books. Playmates has been excellent. They've been wonderful.
Yeah, your coverage on the Turtles was amazing.
Yeah.
All the figures that actually never made it to production.
Yeah, they've been great. There's a couple of, Super 7, those guys who had access to some stuff have been great. But a lot of these companies, like we said, don't exist anymore. LJN's not around anymore. Knickerbocker's not around anymore. So, what do you do with that? So you go talk to the ex-employees. You talk to the sculptors that actually had the role was to make the toy. A lot of those guys, if they retained the drawings, they would get control drawings, and that's what they based their work off of. So a lot of the first book came from ex-executives and sculptors and people who were in the business that way. There was some collector participation, but again, at the time, no one knew who I was. And these guys get approached all the time by people who either want to, buy what they have, or worse yet, steal what they have, one way or another. Either not give them what the true value is, or just actually walk out of the room with it. So people have, that's happened before. I've had stories of guys who've hunted down, ex-employees or or old sculptors, gone to their house, knocked on their door, and when the guy tries to close the door on them, they stick their foot in the door.
Jeez.
So so that made it difficult for me. I had to prove first off that I wasn't a lunatic, and that I wasn't after their stuff. I was after their store. So, and I would like to take pictures of your stuff. So that was how, and once I was able to get in with a couple of folks, with names in the business, slowly but surely you get vouchers. Nice. And people will reach out and say, hey, this guy's trying to talk to me. He goes, yeah, that guy's, he's good. You can talk to that guy.
Right.
He's not, this is what he's doing, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, it's collectors stepped up quite a bit in volume 2 because they saw volume 1 and they realized, oh, this is what this guy's doing. Okay, well, yeah, come on over. So, I had collectors actually put me up for a weekend at their house,
Wow.
Because they were like, yeah, man, I got a ton of stuff. I said, okay, well, I'll come and I'll stay nearby and we could just hang out for the weekend. He goes, no, man, I got an extra room. Come on over. So I'm like, all right, great. Less money I have to spend.
Sure.
Can you tell us any of the ideas for your third book, or are they still kind of like top secret right now that you don't want to give away?
Yeah, people have been after me like, what's the table of contents? It's like, yeah. I don't even know yet. Basically I'm looking at somewhere between 40 and 45 lines.
Wow.
And only about 20 to 25 can make it into the book. So basically what it does, I make a big list, separated out in those 3 sections like I do in the book. So there's the golden age, which is the 80s, the darker times, which is the 90s, and the gilded age, which is the aughts. And I put the lines in those. And slowly but surely, as more information about a single line shows up, they kind of leapfrog one another. And whenever I cut all this off, whatever the top 8 or 9 in each category is, well, that's going to be the book, because I don't want to sit on a line that I have a ton of information for, just like I don't want to put out a line that I don't have enough information for.
Right.
I've been trying to do tiger sharks since volume 1, and it's hard. That is a tough line to get info on, but I can tell you it will be in volume 3. It's been one of the lines that I've been after for a long time. I collected it. I had them all on card for a long time. I don't have them anymore, but I did, and I knew they had a series 2, and I was able to finally track down some stuff. Still not quite as much stuff as I had hoped, but I'm not done yet. Hopefully I will be able to put together a few more pieces and make that a compelling entry. My goal has always been, if I can do a compelling 6 pages, then it'll be under consideration. I like to do 8 and some 10. Turtles, I think, got 14 just because it's Turtles. So yeah, Tiger Sharks will definitely be in there. I am trying to put together a Masters of the Universe chapter, but I'm also trying not to duplicate what is already out there. A lot of these lines, just a ton of stuff out. G.I. Joe, people have asked me about G.I. Joe. I mean, there are books about Joe, and the guys, there are tons of guys who have done wonderful work with unproduced G.I. Joe. So if I did G.I. Joe, it would be the stuff that Joe guys wouldn't be interested in. It would be Sigma 6, or it would be Extreme, one of those offshoots that Joe guys have historically not really been into.
Have you done much based on Indiana Jones? Like for Doom or?
Indiana Jones is actually in the running for 3.
Cool.
I've come across a lot of very little things. And some of the stuff was surprising to me, but Indy might end up being one of those chapters like I did in the first book for Soda, because the first book, it wasn't about any one line at Soda Toys. It was just called The End of Soda, because when they went out, they had a ton of prototypes that they had just taken to Comic-Con and showed more now playing figures. There was a whole new reimagining of the Micronauts. There was all this stuff. And then Jerry came back from Comic-Con and got an unsolicited offer to buy the company, and he sold it. And the rumor has it that all those prototypes ended up in the trash. So, it would be something like that, where it's not just one company. I would try to talk enough about the Kenner stuff, and then we would go into LJN. Maybe we would go into, because there was a minute there where Galoob did some micro machines for it. And then I could talk about the modern Kenner, or the modern Hasbro, that there was a whole other wave of that stuff that never came out.
There's even the Disney park exclusives.
Yeah, there's that stuff.
They had I remember a G.I. Joe doll, but past a couple of years, but he was dressed as Indiana Jones. But I only saw it 1 or 2 vacations there, and I never bought it. Not a big Jones fan, but
the material that I have, some of it is related to just pitch items, stuff that was forwarded but just not taken much beyond the concept drawing.
Right.
I have a sculpt of an Indiana Jones, of a 12-inch Indiana Jones head, a picture of it, that a company that wasn't related to any of the licensors at the time decided that they were going to just pitch. It was during a downtime, probably between Last Crusade and Crystal Skull, that there wasn't any indie product. And so they were going to say, hey, and they were having a meeting with, who is it, Universal? Who is it that has Indiana Jones?
Paramount? Well, now it's Disney, but it used to be Paramount and Lucasfilm, yeah.
Yeah, so they had some meeting. They were going to just say, hey, we have this. Are you interested in this?
I was so disappointed there was no Last Crusade toys when that movie came out in '89.
Two companies had struck out on that license, previously. They just weren't really. I never understood why Indiana Jones didn't click.
Yeah, I like the Kenner toys. They're just so expensive now to get, but I kind of dig them. The only thing I have is the 12-inch indie doll from Raiders. That's the only only collectible I have left of that. But
I had them for a while too. I actually had, and I'm not a big graded toy guy, but I actually had some graded Indiana Jones stuff at one time. I don't have it anymore because I'm not a big graded toy guy. But so indie is on the list.
Cool.
And if I can put together something that I think people would be interested in seeing, I would love to include it.
That's very cool.
Now, you mentioned LJN. Did you discover any Thundercats items?
There are Thundercats towards the end of the line that some were known, some not, some have sculpts, some don't. So LJN was a company that, and the other thing that I wanted to do with the books was try to introduce at least one entry from almost all the companies that were in the ball game back then. And LJN had eluded me up to this point. There was no LJN in volume 1. There was no LJN in volume 2. There will be LJN in volume 3, only because, Tiger Sharks, of course. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple of other lines that I've been looking at from LJN.
Are they still around, LJN?
No,
No.
they got sold to Acclaim in the early 90s.
Okay.
And Acclaim wasn't in the toy business. They bought the video game assets,
Right.
but the whole company got sold, and that was it.
It's always interesting what company buys what. Like I didn't know Knickerbocker was bought by Hasbro, like you said. It's just always interesting. I just thought they went out of business, but
it was a funny story because actually that negotiation started with Knickerbocker buying Hasbro.
That's interesting.
But it ended with Hasbro buying Knickerbocker.
And then Hasbro.
But you got to remember, this is the early 80s. There's a lot of toy companies that have gone through, peaks and valleys. So, they were trying to probably put together a package when all these companies were in a bit of a valley to try to, boost revenues or whatever.
Yeah.
Because when you think about Knickerbocker buying Hasbro, that doesn't sound right.
It doesn't, no.
But back then, could have made sense.
Yeah. So then Hasbro owns Kenner. Is that correct? And I think Tonka, did they buy?
Yeah, because Kenner and Tonka were the same company.
That's right, yeah.
It was Kenner Tonka or Tonka Kenner or whatever it was called.
It's one of those, yeah.
Yeah. So, because, Kenner got bought by General Mills. They were owned by General Mills for a long time. And I think it's General Mills that sold them to Tonka. And then Tonka sold the whole thing to, like Tonka, if I remember correctly, Tonka bought Kenner for like almost $600 million. And then they turned around and sold the combined company to Hasbro for $600 million or something like that. It was like there was no premium, at all. If I'm remembering that correctly, I could be wrong, but it seems like that's about right.
So, Ian, any toy lines you wish would come back or ever created?
Yeah, actually, one I kind of wish the scale better from Mezco, but they do the 112s or whatever. I wish they'd make a Rocketeer. 2 old toy lines. One I would love to see would be like the Princess Bride, whether it be through the reactions or if they made one in a day, just with the basic characters and maybe a play set of like Cliffs of Insanity. And then you can turn it around so you can have like where they had the sword fight. What I would really love, like, I think though, out of all the 80s movies, like growing up, the one I would love the most would be from either childhood, if they did, or if they could do it now, would be the Never-Ending Story. And for that, what I would really love to see would be like just the basic figures, the Treyu and Artex, the teeny weeny was to do with the top hat with the racing snail, the Night Hob, the flying bat, the rock biter and the bike, Childlike Empress, the Gamork, which is that big wolf, which is voiced by Alan Oppenheimer. Of course, Falcor. And maybe for a play set, it would be like Morla, the giant turtle, and from the Swamp of Sadness. And maybe I kind of think of like the Dagobah play set where they had that cushion where R2 could sink in, and that's where Artex could kind of sink. And then just to kind of like round it out, maybe like a mail away proof of purchase thing could be just a Bastion sitting with the book. But I love the movie The Never-Ending Story, and I wish they made some kind of toy out of it.
You have thought this through, Ian. Congratulations.
Thank you. I really have.
I did a toy magazine online in 2014 called Little Plastic Men, which was what the toys at the time got spawned out of. And I did one of the stories I did in the magazine was, okay, reaction, here's what we want. And it was stuff like Last Starfighter and Krull and Tombstone and Caddyshack.
Caddyshack would be cool.
And I think Never-Ending Story was like an honorable mention. But yeah, it always surprised me, and Princess Bride was one too.
Yeah,
Princess Bride always surprised me. There's been some one-off stuff done, Wesley and or Dread Pirate Roberts and that sort of thing. But I can only guess that maybe it's kind of a licensing nightmare, the same way Krull is a licensing nightmare, because a lot of people just don't know what they own, sadly, and to get them to actually get off their keisters and find the paperwork to prove that they own it, you almost have to go ahead and put out a product and have them come slap you with a C&D.
Right.
Okay, so you own it. Okay, well, let's talk. It really is. It's like that. There was a story about a fire that was in LA on like a dock fire. And apparently a ton of paperwork related to licensing went up in this fire. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the story I've heard. And literally that was the paper trail that proved who owned what. Now, what it was doing on a dock in LA, I have no idea. Maybe it was just in a warehouse there somewhere. But no, I'm with you on Princess Bride for sure. Yeah. And Never-Ending Story would be interesting as well. But what it's going to take for all this stuff, sadly, we're going to have to see a reboot of, you know, I mean, we had the Russo brothers recently said in an interview that they would reboot Krull in a heartbeat. So if we got a reboot of Krull, that's the way we're going to get old Krull toys, you know. And sadly, I don't want to see a reboot of Princess Bride because I think it's a perfect movie.
Yeah, same here.
But that's how we're going to get that. That's the first best way.
I think I'd rather see an animated version of the Princess Bride before another live action. If
that would be really cool.
Yeah,
that would be really cool. And in the age of coronavirus, we're going to see a ton of animation coming.
Oh yeah,
I think
that's what can get done right now.
My I guess my biggest hope ever for like never ending story would be like Super 7. They seem to always find the best stuff. So I think if anybody can, and I love their packaging because it makes me think of the old Star Wars toys. If anybody can pull that line off, it would be them. But you know, like you said, we would need something to kind of like get that spark going back for it. But it would be cool. What do you got, Tom? You have any toys from your past?
I would like to see a Hanna-Barbera Herculoids action figure line. Toonami did some pretty cool looking ones, but I think this is a great concept to revisit. A Swiss Family Robinson on an alien planet with different creatures. You have Igloo or Rock Ape, Zot, an alien dragon, Tundro, an alien Triceratops-like creature that can fire rocks from his head. And I believe every creature should come with a human, Xandor, Dorno, or Terra. I would love to see the Four Horsemen do something with these characters. They can add so much detail and articulation. I think the Herculoids are ready for an updated version. But as an honorable mention, I would love to see Brave Star. And I've talked to Brian Flynn about this, and he said he doesn't even know who owns the rights to Brave Star anymore. Coming back to that whole rights issue.
It's a real issue. I mean, people, you would think that that wouldn't be an issue at all. It'd be slam dunk. Oh yeah, here's all the stuff we own, and yeah, it's not that simple. And a lot of sometimes these rights are separated or are broken up between different companies and individuals. One of the main problems with Last Starfighter is that I think there are 2 to 3 parties involved. One of them, like the production company, owns the right to a sequel.
Oh, that would have been cool.
But the original author of the movie, owns the right to the reboot or something strange like that. And both he and Gary Whitta, who wrote Rogue One, have been working on a Last Starfighter reboot. There was some art that got leaked, and they leaked it themselves, mainly just to try to get interest, about a year and a half ago, that looked awesome.
Telling a friend of mine about the Last Starfighter. He let me his DVD, and I finally got to see the full movie, and I was like, this is really a cool movie. You know, the effects were great for its time, but I was like, they really could remake this if we could see more aliens, and then just the whole concept of like the video game being how they find their pilot. If you read the book Armada by Ernest Cline, it's sort of like the Last Starfighter.
Right.
I think Ready Player One was a better written book, but Armada was an interesting idea for what he was doing, and it took gaming, and these people then would go and defend the Earth, sort of Last Starfighter. But that would be pretty cool.
Well, that's the thing. Now they could update it to where it's not an upright video game. It's a downloadable game on your PS5 or whatever, and some kid gets really good at it.
They use drones or something.
And the next thing you know, the spaceship lands in his backyard, and here's Robert Preston, although Robert Preston's dead. They could. That's an easily rebootable to modern times story, and I hope they do it, because again, that's going to be the way we get our vintage Gunstar. If it happens, that's going to be how it happens.
News this week from Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. They are doing a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles CG animated movie coming up right now. My only question about that is, does that cancel the live action reboot?
From what I read, it does cancel it. Well, I think it also cancels it more because of the whole COVID thing, because people can animate, they can even animate from home. Whereas right now, some things are picking up production and some things are still shut down. So I believe it is replacing the live action. But then again, they can turn around and still do a live action anyway. You never know.
Also coming a Beavis and Butthead reboot from Comedy Central for 2 new seasons. Judge will be on board to voice both characters, but here's the interesting part. It's going to take place in a Generation Z world, Beavis and Butthead going to translate into Generation Z, or are they going to be parents for the Generation Z?
Parents like grown-up versions, you mean?
Yeah.
I hope not. I don't want to see them have kids. They're just funnier watching music videos, but they don't even have music videos these days, it seems.
I was curious about that, mainly because when I thought about a Beavis and Butthead reboot, like, isn't a Beavis and Butthead reboot just Beavis and Butthead again? Do you really have to reboot that?
Yeah.
But again, like you said, such a big part of that was the video.
And didn't they try that already? They came out with a couple of years ago.
Are they going to change? Are they going to be CG? Are they going to change the way they look? Are they going to, Beavis and Butthead is Beavis and Butthead. I don't know what you can do with that. I mean, maybe they'll surprise me. Mike Judge is a freaking genius. So if he's on board,
Office Space is great.
Then, I mean, he must have a plan. So that it'll be very interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I have a lot of confidence in Mike Judge. I don't think he's going to let us down. This actually made the list of figures I would like to see. Clone High is getting a reboot from MTV.
Well, is MTV going back more into animation again? But that, like, if they're bringing back Clone High, are they gonna do more animated shows?
It was from MTV, although they're not sure Clone High is going to be on MTV. It might be a CBS All Access show.
Oh, okay. Because I remember they had where Beavis and Butthead came from was a show called Liquid TV in the '90s, right. And I used to love that show.
Frog Baseball.
Every week. Frog Baseball, and they used to have stick figure theater. I mean, they did Night of the Living Dead and stick figures. They did Cyrano de Bergerac. It was just so great. I'd love to see them bring back that. So I don't even know what's on MTV anymore. I don't even watch it. And
it's reality shows.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't want to watch that. Reality's that's why I like toys, because of reality.
And like I said, like we mentioned earlier, man, it's all animation going forward. I mean, there are tons and tons and tons. I mean, to the point to where I've even looked at an old property that I did 10 years ago and said, you know what, that'd be a cool animated series. But right now, all these guys are blowing and going just nonstop. And it was like, if I had the money, I'd start an animation studio right now.
Oh, sure.
Right now. Because I would have the work they would be lining up at the door.
One of the things I'm surprised the most is that on YouTube, the Star Wars Kids channel, they do the Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures. Mm-hmm. They're like a minute long with the original voices of the actors and clips from the movie. And I'm like, I don't know if it would just be like milking the franchise, but like, why not make an animated movie with these voices to that like anime style and just release it on Disney Plus or something? I would love to see what they did, because even in 60-second little short if they do a scene from The Empire Strikes Back or whatever, it's just they animate it so well and they add a little new things to it, and it's like, man, this looks so cool. So I would love to see that, but maybe Disney will get back to doing some more animating.
More about Clone High. So the original creators, Philip Lord, Chris Miller of Legos and Spider-Man in the Multiverse fame, are teaming up with Scrubs creator Bill Lawrence for a new Clone High series. Now, according to this article from EW, it may be a new cast of historical figures. It may not even be the original.
So it'll be like Lincoln, right? He was one
of them? Yeah, it might not be Lincoln or Gandhi or Cleopatra. It might just be a whole new set of different people. And then more animation news. Scott Pilgrim versus the World might actually be getting an animated series.
So there was a previous animated?
There was, I believe it was 3 shorts they made. They were 15 minutes each. And I think you can find them on the DVD of Scott Pilgrim.
I like, the movie to me is like a live action animated video game. Right. So it's like, it would be interesting to see an animated film.
Yeah, I'd definitely be looking. And I'd be curious to see who they get for voice actors too.
Yeah. They must be more in demand now than ever.
Yeah.
If animation is going to be cooped up more, they can just record out of their house. Like a lot of them have a studio built into their house, and the animators animate from there and so on. So
Lower Decks, the CBS All Access digital subscription service, has announced that Thursday, August 6th, will be the premiere episode of Lower Decks, the Star Trek animated TV show. It's basically Robot Chicken on Star Trek.
So
except it's animated.
Which Enterprise is this first? Is it?
Oh, it's brand new. Everything's new.
So it's not like Kirk or Picard or anybody? Okay. I'm not a Star Trek fan, so I'm not sure, but I was just wondering.
I think the log line for that was something about the worst starship in the fleet. When you're following or the most insignificant starship in the fleet, and you're following like 4 ensigns that are assigned to it.
Oh, they're the
I
red.
didn't know anything about that until that teaser popped up a couple of days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, they're making a Star Trek animated series. That's interesting. And then I saw what it was. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. I think maybe it had something to do with the Orville being so popular. Comedy / Galaxy Quest-y kind of thing happening. Yeah. And so Star Trek, has the name in place. So why not give it a go with some characters that attach to, like Kirk or Spock or whatever. You don't want to see them buffooning those guys up necessarily, but some other, some red shirts so you can just go out and kill, right?
Yeah. Well, I know Stupid Buddy Studios a few years ago had the same idea for Star Wars, and even George Lucas got involved.
Detours,
yes.
Oh, there are like 38 episodes of that made.
Yeah. Was it Seth
Green?
Seth Green, yeah, and that was right before Disney bought it.
Yeah. They're in the can. They're done. They previewed like 3 of them at Comic-Con a few years back.
Yeah.
And there's footage out there, but everyone's saying that we will never see them.
Like that's a shame.
It was originally called May 25th, 1977. And they kept lowering the title, but it's this live-action movie about the day Star Wars came out. The main actor, I think it's John Francis Daly, who used to be in Freaks and Geeks. His main character, who's all in. He wants to do special effects. He's all into Star Wars. Makes his own movies. It's one of those movies that takes place in one day, and it's like it's the day Star Wars comes out, and there's these big parties and this and that. And the guy who directed Angus, if you ever seen that movie, Spaced Invaders. If you remember that, with the aliens, one talks like Jack Nicholson. Mm-hmm. This movie's been made for like years. It's got Christopher Lloyd. It's got I think Colleen Camp, and it's been shown at festivals, but it's never been like released, and it's not even Lucasfilm. It's just I have no idea why this movie's not released, but it looks incredible. That's interesting though. Yeah, I remember hearing about Detours.
Pixel Dan's book, The Toys of Masters of the Universe, got pushed back to February 2021.
Is there any reason for that? Do we know, like publishing things?
Probably COVID.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's virus related.
It's got to sting a little because you put so much. I guess, Blake, you would understand that you put so much effort into a book, and then you're all psyched to have it out, and then it gets pushed back. That's got to.
Yeah,
and it stinks too because he was really waiting for them to solicit it before he would talk more about it.
So does he have to like not talk more about it now? Is he?
No, he's been putting stuff out on Twitter, but yeah, this is kind of a big blow.
Oh, sure.
All the way back to February.
That would hurt.
I mean, it would have been a great Christmas gift.
Now it could be somebody's Valentine's gift.
Mm-hmm. And then our buddy Rob McCallum has announced for his action figure adventure, his live auction, which will be filmed, will take place on August 13th of this year. And you can read more about it or find out how you can bid on actionfigureadventure.com. I can't wait for this show to come out. I've seen some footage. This film's going to be amazing.
Cool.
It's about fans, for fans, and then hopefully we can get Rob on the show to talk more about it.
That'd be cool.
Yep. So thank you, Mr. Wright, for joining us on this episode.
Oh, yeah, no worries, man. Had a good time. Always love to talk toys.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have anything you'd like to plug besides Volume 3? Anything coming up?
Not really. I mean, I should have been, like I said, I should have been traveling now. I was planning on doing a handful of shows because after we did Volume 1, we took a little bit of a tour and went out and did some shows and some book signings and that sort of thing. And that was something that we just, by the time it came time to start thinking about that, we got derailed just like everybody else did. So I will say that the book is still available. You can either still get it directly through me, or you can get it through Big Bad Toy Store. That's typically where I send my international customers because the book is expensive to send overseas.
Now you can get your book directly from you through your Facebook page?
Yeah, if you go to facebook.com/toys-that-time-forgot, there's a pinned post at the top. It'll give you the instructions on how to get either a copy of the book or a Toxie or both. Yeah, and I'm about 70 to 75% 5% sold through on volume 2. So
Wow.
it probably won't last the year, or just last the year, maybe. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to put aside another little tranche in order to get, if somebody wants 2 and 3 in the February Kickstarter. Although since I don't have any 1s anymore, maybe that's, I don't know yet. We're still trying to figure that out.
Right.
And just so, because people always ask about volume 1, when are you going to reprint it? When are you going to reprint it? When are you going to reprint it? Well, reprinting volume 1 costs money. We had talked about doing a Kickstarter for a reprint, and that's not fully off the table. But just because of everything that's been going on, I've decided to put the focus of my extra time on completing volume 3, and that we would pick up the idea of going forward with a reprint of volume 1 after the volume 3 Kickstarter. I don't not want people to have this book. I want people to have volume 1. It will get done. It's just going to take a little time. I am planning on possibly putting in, like Ian mentioned earlier, extra content, because you may look, if you have a volume 1 and a volume 2 is about 16 pages, I think, bigger than volume 1. So I would add, basically that same kind of page count, either through adding content to existing chapters or perhaps a whole new bonus chapter.
That's cool.
Just to make it different from the Kickstarter reward, give it a different color scheme, make it, so the Kickstarter stands out as something that was its own thing. So yeah, we are definitely still trending in that direction, and it'll get reprinted. It's just a matter of time. And I understand that people are anxious and they're eager to get it now. And if I could make that happen, I would, but I got to take one step at a time here.
Yeah.
It's a great book if you haven't picked it up yet and you love toys. This volumes, both 1 and 2, fantastic. I mean, the amount of work he's put into this book is just incredible. I mean, you should take a bow, sir, because you've done an incredible job.
Yeah, it was, the whole concept was I wanted a book that I could be proud of and that collectors would be proud to have in their collection. That was it. That was the motivation. So I didn't want to do paperback. I didn't want to do, an ebook. I wanted a solid hardback, nice presentation, stuff that, something that you would be, like I said, proud to display in your own collection.
Yeah. Bookshelf for your coffee table or something like that.
Yeah. And I've been to a handful of collectors' homes, post volume 1. So I was invited to a party after a Cincinnati Toy Show a couple of years ago. I didn't know the guy whose house it was, but some folks vouched for me, and I showed up and just walking around his, man cave, and there was the bookshelf, and there was my book.
That must have felt great.
Oh, that's awesome. There's no feeling like that in the world. And I was just like, there you go. That's what I was after. Nice. So since then, I've run into that a couple more times, and it's been really cool. And I'm just happy to have been able to, to have the support and the participation and the Kickstarter backers. I mean, none of this would have been done without them, and so hopefully they'll come back for volume 3 and anything else I do going forward, because I have plans. It's just a matter of getting them done.
Well, thanks again to Brian Salvatore for our music. And please remember, you can find us now on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Podbeam. If you want to be a part of the conversation, you can email us at toyspodcast@gmail.com. Once again, thank you, Mr. Wright.
Yeah,
Play with your toys.
That's right.
Stay safe.